All right, so now let's take this, kind of bring it for a home run, so to speak. Let's put it all together. I'm just going to be looking at the boarding example that we did, and we've got all of this code, but this isn't very organized. We haven't put it into modules, and so that's something that we've been working on. So let's take this code that we've created and let's make it modular. And well, let's just walk into it and see what happens. So the first thing that we remember to do is we need to create a main method. And we need to call our main method. So that's the only way to make it run. So we're going to create our main method. And so all of this code needs to go into some kind of method or another, rather than just kind of dangling up there. So we're going to get this organized a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a module called check in the dog. And the idea here is that all of this information, maybe someone's at the counter and they're checking in their dog for boarding, and we're going to print out how much we're going to charge for the stay based on the weight of the dog. And the idea is, let's just write this out. So kind of a point of sale system, calculate, check in a dog or customer, and then calculate, calculate the price of the stay based on the weight of the dog. So a dog that is greater than 50 pounds will be equal to number of days of stay times, we'll say that that's $10, kind of high, but that's okay. Otherwise, the price will be equal to days of stay times 8, something like that. Okay, so that's the idea. Let's try to organize this. So the idea then is they're checking in their dog, and we want to give them an idea how much it's going to cost them to board their dog here. So let's see. So we're going to have this check-in module, and the check-in module is going to get the information about the dog, and then we're going to create the instance of the dog, and we'll display the dog info. That's probably a good thing to do. So, paste that all in here. And we have to do the appropriate indenting. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this second dog. All right, so the idea here is check in dog. Okay, so here's the deal. Remember when we were talking about scope of variables? If I try to print out, let's say I try to print out dog1 dot display dog info from here. Let's just do that. I'm going to comment it out of here, and we're going to try and print it out here. Okay, so if we try to, so here we created this new dog, and if we try to create it from the main, remember that we can't, because let's just run it and see what happens. Dog's name is Fluffy, and dog's weight is 8 pounds, and we get this dog1 is not defined. And so what's happening here is, if you remember when we talked about the scope of variables, that this dog1 is only available inside of this method. Once we leave that method, the code leaves the method, then dog1 is no longer a valid variable. And so when we try to run this objects method, we get this dog1 not found. And so what we're going to do is we're going to, when we run, let me print this back out and we'll get rid of this bad line here. When we call this method, what we're going to do is we're going to, I'm just going to call it the dog. We're going to return, the object of the dog. So before we've returned values, just like 6 or a string. Now we're going to return this instance or this object or this specific dog that we created here with its unique name and its unique weight. We're going to return that dog and put it into this variable. So now when we try to access any of the information about that dog here, we have information because this is now a local variable to main, and it got the object that we needed. We just put it into just a different variable. So now if we printed out the dog.doggy name, for example, it will work. So let's just see if that works to start with. So I'm going to run this code, and what is the doggy's name? Fluffy. And the doggy's weight is 8 pounds. And you can see that the display info worked. That's from our prior code. We created that method where it's going to print out its name and its weight. But then that object was returned and put into this variable. And now the variable has access to its name. So now we're not only creating objects, but we're sending objects back and forth in modules because modules only have access to that variable while you're in that module. So let's continue on with this example. I'm going to get rid of this. All right, so now that we've created our object, our dog object, which is what we did in this module, we want to calculate the price of the boarding. We could create a method here in the dog class, but really anything that's pertaining to the boarding information is really specific just to this file. In other words, if I put it in the blueprint, our grooming file really wouldn't care too much about boarding prices. So therefore, that's a good candidate for a module that we're going to keep within. It's not going to be part of our dog class. We're going to create this module and keep it within the boarding example. So let's do a module called calculate price. Okay. Now, remember that the dog is also local to this method. So if we call calculate here, and I try to run the dog display data or something along those lines, it won't work because calculate price needs to receive that as an argument. So I'm going to just call it dog obj, for example. All right. So now what we'll do is we'll say, let's get the days of stay. Days of stay. We're going to get this from our input equals input. I'm going to open and close that parenthesis. I also know that this is going to be an integer, so I'm going to put the integer around the input statement so I know that it'll be converted to an int. And then inside of this, let's see, I'm going to spread this out so we have more room. Inside of the input statement, I'm going to put in how many days will. Now I get, because I have this object, I have this dog object, I certainly have that dog object's name, don't I? So I'm going to use this format. In here, I'm going to put the dog's name. I don't need this N. Okay. Will be staying. How long will this dog's name be staying? Question mark. And then close the quotations, put a period, format, open and close parentheses. And inside this open and closing parentheses, I know I have the dog, this specific dog's name. I have to spell it case correct. Okay. So now we're getting a little bit more detail, and I don't have to do this, but it's just giving me a little bit more detail, a little bit more specific on my input statement. And I'm trying to give you practice on seeing how to use this format, string formatting. Okay, so now we know how many days the dog is staying. We need to calculate the price. So if I have this object, so I not only know the dog's name, but I also know my individual weight, don't I? So if dog obj.doggy weight is greater than 50, then the price is equal to, what did we say, days of stay times 10. Days of stay times 10, else price is equal to days of stay times 8. And then we're going to return that value, return price to whoever called it. So we haven't called it yet. So what we'll do is we'll now call what we're saying, let's see, the price is equal to, we need to call this method. So I'm just going to copy that. And we need to send it the dog object that we're talking about. Well, that's this dog. Okay, so we're going to send it over this dog. And then once that price will be calculated, that price gets returned, put into the price. And then we can put print the price. Let's just see if that works. So I'm going to make this smaller. Okay, and we'll run that again. So, oh, I got to run from here. So run, and dog's name is Fluffy. Fluffy is 8 pounds, and Fluffy will be staying 10 days. So 80 is the correct number. Let's try it the other way. Let's put Bruno in, or I guess we had Goldie, and Goldie was 85 pounds. So let's run that, and we'll put in what is the dog's name? So we're going to create a dog named Goldie, and Goldie is 85 pounds. How many days will it be staying? And so 100. So we see that code is working. So what we're trying to demonstrate here is the difference between calling a objects method, but what we're doing here instead is we're creating methods that are specific just to the code, to the file we're writing the code in. We're still utilizing, let me see if I can get that over so we can see. But we're utilizing the object. We're sending the object back and forth. So when, let's see here, when we first ran our main, we first created the object. We then sent the object back to main because this is a local variable. It's local in scope. It's only available to the check-in dog module. So we sent the dog that we created back to whoever called this method. And we put that dog in other words, the first time I guess we ran Fluffy. So now Fluffy exists in this variable. The whole object, every bit of that object is in here. So that means that the dog, because it's a dog object, has all of the things that it got from its blueprint. Got a doggy name, it's got a doggy weight. So then we wanted to calculate the price. So we sent that dog. This is like picking up Fluffy and sending Fluffy over to this other module. And this method received the dog, in this case Fluffy. And now that it's got Fluffy, it's got a hold of Fluffy in this variable. We were able to get Fluffy's name from that variable. We were able to get Fluffy's weight, calculate the price according to the weight and the days of stay, and return that price so that we could print out the price. That information was returned here. So if that's confusing because of all the variable names, we can make the variable names the same. So if this makes sense to you, great, ignore what I'm about to say. But if all these different variable names don't make sense to you, then what we can do is we can call them the same names. I made the variable names different so you can see that they were kind of moving around. But let's do it another way. Let's take these names. Let's see, so the first thing we sent was dog1. So let's return dog1, and we can put dog1 here. Recognize that this is a new variable that's just specific to the main. And we can send dog1 to calculate price, dog1, and we can, they're just names. And then we'd have to change all of these to dog1, and that should work. So that should still work the same way. And the reason why the names can stay the same really is because this variable is, again, local just to this function. So as soon as we left this function, dog1 no longer exists in this format, but this is a new variable that got created in main, and so therefore it's unique to main. But it did get the same dog passed to it because we passed that dog here. So this will work the same way. And we can see that happen. Let's try Bruno this time. Bruno, he's 150 pounds. And you can see that everything is working the same. He's staying 10 days and he should be $100. So here we're just sending objects back and forth instead of what we call primitive data types. In other words, we're not passing just numbers or we're not passing strings, but we're actually passing that dog around or the object that we created from our dog class.